Hello and welcome everybody who's joining. We'll just wait a couple of minutes, or not even a few seconds. I think we've probably got people here. So hello, welcome. Thank you very much for coming to this talk. It's very exciting, and I'm actually a little bit nervous because it's difficult to get the interaction. So but I just wanted to sort of congratulate Jonathan and the Language Live team for, you know, having taken this event and put it online. Confinement won't get us down. So, just, I see someone's put something in the chat. Let me just get the chat open. So, hello everyone. Yeah, so perhaps you'd like to just say hello to people in the chat, tell everyone where you're from. So today, what I'm going to try and talk about is some of the sort of dilemmas we face as teachers. Hello, Carolyn from Australia, and Emma from London, and Tessa, and everybody. And so we've got a really international group here. Fantastic. So I'm going to be talking about some of the dilemmas that we face as teachers with this sort of students who come to us who don't have the level but need a really high level, a high band score in IELTS. So it's kind of how we might deal with those expectations. And hopefully I'll be able to share some of my ideas, and I'll also ask you to share ideas as we go along in the chat. For me, myself, my name's Louisa Dunne. I'm an exams academic support manager based in Paris, working for the British Council. And I work with both teachers and students who are preparing for IELTS and also for some Cambridge exams. Now, I can't see if we have a hands up facility here. Yes, you've raised your hands. Okay, so I'm going to give you a question and then I want you to raise your hands. So could you put your hand up if you are currently teaching IELTS, just to get an idea? So, okay, so that's 21, 22, very good. Could you put your hands down? Oh, and if you're not currently teaching IELTS, but you think that you will be teaching IELTS in the future, could you put your hands up? Or if you are currently teaching IELTS and think that you will be teaching in the future as well. That's great. That's 53 of us. And if you could take your hands down again. And the last question for you, is there anyone here who has themselves taken IELTS? Okay. All right, so that's 10 of us, 9 or 10. Okay, so that's interesting. So the real experts in the room are the people who've taken the test, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about the talk. So just to answer that question, Itziar's asking, will I be able to send you the recording? Itziar, I do not know. You'll have to see with the language show people, because I don't know if they're recording or what. So I hope that's possible, but please see with the language show people. So we've got 45 minutes, or probably about 43 now. And I'm going to be using the chat box largely to ask you to respond to the questions that I ask you, to share your ideas in the chat box. And what we're going to be looking at is some of the strategies that we can use to manage the expectations of those students who come to us and say, I need IELTS specific band score. Sources of expertise that we can use, discuss some alternatives to IELTS preparation courses, think about what things we as teachers need to teach the students, and what is it that, what kind of information, what things can they learn without us. And I'm going to just tell you about 2 IELTS short course syllabuses that we created. Now, looking with Jonathan before we started, I'd hoped I'd be able to share them in the chat, but we can't actually do that. So I will give you my email on the last slide. And if you'd like me to send you the syllabuses, I'd be very happy to do that. So without further ado, my first question is, who are the IELTS students that you're dealing with? So the first question, if you could tell me in the chat, are your students taking the academic or the general training version of IELTS? Oh, somebody's mum is taking IELTS. That's lovely. Okay, so both, I mean, more people dealing with the academic version than the general training one, but that makes sense because, you know, about 70% of the people who take the IELTS test take it for the, to access higher education. My next question is, if you can answer in the chat, why do your students want or need IELTS generally? Someone said for job promotion, immigration, for universities in the UK, for nurses, higher education, to study or work abroad, visas for the UK as well there. Okay, lovely. And so, somebody to study law. Okay, so that's really the same as the next question about what they want to use the IELTS for. What sort of time frames is my next question for you? What sort of time frames do you have to work with the students? Do they want it 2 months? Tessa's saying 9 months. Deborah's saying 3 or 6 months. Some other people like Sarah, they're saying they want it very quickly. If you've got, you know, 3 months, 6 months, or an academic year, then that's pretty good. Yep. Okay. But Sean's talking about, okay, but you've got 72 weeks, Sean, to do that. 2 years, 6 hours a week, 72 weeks. Okay. And what sort of scores do your students need is the next question. 6.5, 6.7, 6.5, 6.5 or higher. Okay, someone there with just needs a 4 for the UK visa. To that person, I'm sorry, I couldn't see your name because the chat's going so quickly, but do make sure if they only need a 4, they might actually be able to do an easier test, such as the IELTS life skills tests, if it's for a UK visa, because 4 in IELTS is quite low. And my last question is, what's the sort of language level of the students that you're dealing with? Okay, Martine's saying B1, Liz is saying 5.5 to 6. Mixed ability, Sean, yes, sympathy. I know what you mean. An A2 needing a band 4, okay, 5 and over. So again, a huge range. So, you know, why our students need IELTS? So obviously some of them do need it for immigration, and some of you mentioned that in the chat. And then it's usually the general training version that they need. The 2 versions are at the same level. And that's, IELTS is always very clear, you know, the 2 versions are at the same level, and a general training band 7 has the same value as an academic band 7. But I think when it's to do with familiarity with the language, because the academic version of IELTS uses more academic language, that may present more of a problem than the sort of general English focus in the general training. So they're at the same level, but we may need to help our students particularly because it's academic language that they may not be familiar with. And the other thing is occasionally we get people taking IELTS for professional registration purposes or for internal promotion, but I think that's a very small minority. I don't know how to say your name, is it Sean Reeves? Said that some need UKVI IELTS. Yeah, if you're working with students who are applying to study, who are planning to study not at university level, and they do not, by virtue of their passport, already have the right to get a visa for the UK, so non-Europeans, they may need a UKVI, and we can only dream what will happen after December, maybe everyone. So Zubeda Ali is asking, are we going to get materials discussed? Zubeda, the actual course outlines, I'm going to have my email on the last slide and I'll send them out to you, but we will be discussing materials. I haven't been able to share them with you, so I think you'll see them, we'll talk about it. And I'm really focusing on how we can manage student expectations, sources where we can send our students or where we can go ourselves as teachers to get extra materials. And I will send out the course outlines to anyone who's interested. My email will be at the end. Tessa's asking if it's for professional registration purposes, would that be IELTS general or academic, or does it depend? I think more commonly it would be the academic, but yes, it depends, and presumably the student themselves would know. So looking at the challenge, so you've got a student with an A2 English level, and they need an IELTS 6.5 to go to the university of their choice to study the subject of their choice, and you've got 6 months. What do you think would help? Could I ask you, because I think a lot of you are living this situation, what have you found that is helpful in this case? Marie Madeleine, you're asking, why do we need the general paper? That's for immigration purposes. So if this is, okay, so Gula's talking about vocabulary. I agree with you, Gula. I think, you know, a lot of the content of IELTS is about the Lexis. So you're saying you work with vocabulary. Anybody else? How do you deal with this? Elizabeth's saying paraphrasing. Yep. Working on the writing and getting them to do practice tests, using immersion techniques, getting them to interact more with English through either people or the internet. Rose is saying lots of reading. Yes, so basically they need lots of things. So one of the problems, I think, is what we have in our situation. So in France, the students who come to us, sometimes it's the parents, in fact, and they bring us their 16-year-old son or daughter, and they say he needs IELTS because he might want to study abroad in 2 years' time. And the first thing is, well, actually IELTS is only valid for 2 years, so better not to do it 2 years in advance because you just have to do it again. But the problem is that they are, they kind of want a 6.5 or a 7, but if they're only B1 level, they're not going to get it. So the thing is, what I'm sort of want to really talk about is how we can convince the students that it isn't actually IELTS preparation that they need immediately, because if we can explain to the students in some way and convince them your level of English is A2. IELTS is a reliable English test of your language level. That's why the universities and the immigration authorities recognize it and like it. So if you're at A2 and you need a 6.5, you need to be about at least a B2. So to get someone from A2 to B2, the research is out there, the authorities are out there who've, you know, done this research and worked out how long it takes. And actually, it takes a long time, and we'll look at that. That's one of the things that I wanted to sort of share with you. The point is that we get students who get trapped in their A2 and they're in an IELTS prep class and they're just doing IELTS exam techniques, and it's not getting them where they need to be. And there really is no silver bullet. People are always looking for the silver bullet that will get you the IELTS 6.5. And actually, if you're a strong B2 language level, you should get an IELTS 6.5 if you understand what's required in the test. So, so trying to do that, is there anything that you have done when you faced this sort of situation, the student's language level and the IELTS score that they need? There's a huge difference. Is there anything that you have used, that you've worked, sort of what kind of strategy has worked with you? If you've got a student who says, I need IELTS, and you're like, yes, but you're A2, you need 6.5, you're not going to get 6.5 until you're at B2 level. Anything that you have used that's been useful? If you could share anything in the chat there. Okay, so Deborah, that's a good point. So focus on the weakest skill. Yep, John's saying individual tutorials with speaking. Yep. Yeah, I agree with Hedwig. I think it's build there. And Jan, lovely to see you there, Jan. Use news in levels. Yes, totally agree. National Geographic resources with lower level materials. That's from Dima Al Mohammed. Thanks for that. And Elizabeth, yes, it is much easier if we're teaching one-to-one. Alison's saying immersive listening practice and continue building systematically all their skills. Yes, I think we need to try and convince the, yes, please could everyone, if you are using the chat, could you set the 2 so that your chat goes to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see what you're chatting? Because if you have to set that yourself in the chat box at the top next to the 2, there's a little drop down arrow and you click on it and you have a choice to chat with everyone. So this is unfortunately the only way that we can really communicate. So I talk and you chat, but it's nice if we can all see it all. Yes, so for me, the thing is to move the target or the focus of away from I need IELTS 6.5, because that isn't really what they need. What they actually want is they want to go to Exeter to study marine biology, if they offer it in Exeter. But the students tend to focus on, I need a 6.5 in IELTS. No, you don't. You need English, which is good enough to follow the university course that you want. Yeah, so I agree with Tessa. I mean, they can do a practice test if they want to see, you know, what score they get if they need to be convinced. But yeah, I wouldn't be going near IELTS test, practice tests with A2 students who need 6.5. I really can't see the point. And I think we are language teachers. We know how to teach language. And, you know, that is actually what our students need. But, you know, yes, a bit of exam strategies, but not too much. So the first thing that I would suggest using for the students is showing them what the CEF are, how it relates. So if your student is B1, that's the score that they're going to get, between 4 and 5, and so on. They're not going to get a 7 or above unless they already have that C1 level of English. Tessa, it might be demoralizing, yep, but in fact, we might need to demoralize them in order to get them to understand that it's about the language, because otherwise I've heard from teachers who, you know, just do a year of IELTS prep with an A2 student. I think it's possibly better to be really honest and direct, you know, and make sure that they understand, you know, this is your level. And then there's a lot of authorities that you can use to back up that position. This diagram that you can see here, you can also find it, the same information, different format, in the IELTS guide for teachers on the Take IELTS site, and also a similar diagram on the Cambridge Assessment English site. So it's not you as the teacher saying it, you're saying, look, this is what Cambridge says, this is what IELTS says, and that is my sort of angle with it. The other thing I think it's sometimes useful to do is to show them what it's like with the Cambridge exams. So, you know, the Cambridge exams are very clearly mapped to CEFR, and again on the site, oh, it's from DK, I'm sorry. So on the site, it's very clear that to move between the levels in terms of the Cambridge exams, it's a minimum of 120 hours that they recommend of classroom study, which has within it the fact that you're giving them homework and everything else. They're doing some work outside of class. If you're in the UK, you know, they've got that opportunity to have some immersion. And actually, the research shows that as we move up, it takes longer. So yes, you might be able to get from A2 to B1 in 120 hours, but if you're trying to get from B2 to C1 or C1 to C2, it's going to take a lot longer than that. So if the students don't really want to believe you, I mean, they can't argue with Cambridge. That's my position. That's what I would say. So there are other useful sources, and obviously I'm very happy to share the PowerPoint with you. So just send me a quick email at the end if you'd like it. So we've got the Cambridge English profile, which goes into a lot of detail about what it means at the different levels. You know, what they need to know at the different levels to be a, you know, a B2 or a C1. There's on the Cambridge English site there, it explains how the tests fit together with the CEFR in terms of research and validation. There's also information on the Council of Europe site. Obviously, you could, you know, if they doubt their level, there are lots of free placement tests available on Oxford, on the Cambridge site, on the British Council site. And there's also an online test on the British Council's on Learn English site, which is free. And then you've got also the Equals core curriculum. So these are some of the sources of expertise that I would recommend referring to. Amina takes at least 120 hours, they say, to move from one CEFR level to the next. Yep, that's what they say. And they say as it goes higher, it takes longer, obviously. So, and then just some other sources that you could look at. That diagram mapping IELTS to the CEFR is obviously available in the IELTS guide for teachers, which if you haven't got it and you're teaching IELTS, I'd like to suggest that you should get a copy because it's got a lot of useful information in it. There's then, of course, if you work, and you can download it from that link, there's then your own school's course and level system and methodology statements and this, so that can be used to just help the students to see where they are, where they want to go, and what their long-term aim should be, which is, their long-term aim is not 6.5 in IELTS. Their long-term aim, as far as I'm concerned, is either professional advancement in their career or to study something at university with a view to having a good life afterwards, or, you know, to emigrate somewhere to have a new life. And this is the issue for me, because particularly for the students who are trying to access university, there's a lot of research that says that a student needs to have a C1 level of English if they want to successfully study at university in an English-speaking country, in an English medium university. Now, if they have a B2, they'll get through the course, for sure, hopefully. But when it comes to it, that might be someone who, in fact, in terms of their knowledge of the subject and their intelligence and how hard they work and everything, you know, there's lots of factors there. They might be actually someone who should be on track to get a first-class degree. But if they've got only a B2 level of English, they're going to find it almost impossible to get the university degree that they deserve. And so this for me is, this upsets me. It upsets me. I think, you know, that it's part of our role as teachers is to try to make them understand your aim is to be an engineer. Your aim is not IELTS 6.5. IELTS 6.5 is just a hoop that you've got to jump through. But what you actually need is the language skills to successfully follow the course, or to successfully work as a nurse or a doctor or whatever it is they want to do. And even a student who goes into a university with a B2 level of English, if the research again says they should have language support when they get to university. Whether or not they do obviously depends on the university. And Alicia, yes, a very good point. The levels are not linear and the progression is more complex than that. I agree with you. And Elizabeth saying some universities are only asking for IELTS 6. Yep. And, you know, education is also a business. I don't know what to say. Yes, universities will take people with a 6, and they may or may not give them the language support that they need to actually effectively follow the course. And yes, as Sean Reeves is saying, Cambridge and Oxford, 7, I've heard higher than that as well. Yep. But also the universities, Deborah, you do need that score, I think, to cope. But also the universities, what do I want to say? They're going to take people with lower scores than that. And they may or may not, depends on the university, give them the language support they need. Yeah. And yes, obviously it depends, as Raymond's saying, depends on how linguistically demanding the course is. So going back to, so what else can we offer? What do you offer to students who don't have the level, but want to prepare for IELTS? Any tips for the data analysis paper? Marie-Madeleine, you're talking about IELTS academic writing task 1. I can't do it in the 20 minutes we've got left, but please check the Take IELTS website, because we're running regular webinars for both test takers and for teachers. And we do have some things on those writing task 1 tasks. Yes, and Sean Reeves, I agree with you. It is that IELTS can be a challenge even for a native speaker. So back to the question, other alternatives. So Sean's got a foundation IELTS course. Deborah's giving lots of support. Zubaida, how to improve the students whose language level is low, especially for underdeveloped countries. Zubaida, it's all about the amount of reading, the amount of listening, the amount of grammar they learn. It's about quantity. And nowadays, with so much available free on the internet, I think it's accessible if your students have internet access. Okay, yes, thank you, Jan. That was mine. That was mine. Thank you, Jan. So, I mean, the first thing that I would say is if you've got a student who comes to you with a lower level of English, wants a high level IELTS band score to study at university, give them academic English, because every major publisher has fantastic academic English books. And there's even the Headway Academic Skills series goes as low as A0 or A1. And Sean's saying, yes, they can repeat the year, but no, it's not really helpful. It'd be better to direct them, if it's possible, into studying academic English. If they're going to go to university, that's what they'll need. And in fact, the skills they learn for IELTS aren't enough for what they're going to have to do when they get to university. It's just a snapshot. Yes, Paul, we think there will be a recording. Some Unlock 5 as a good pre-IELTS course. Thanks for that suggestion, Benji. Another thing that we've done in Paris is we've offered precision or accuracy-based courses. Alicia's saying pre-sessional courses. Yep, those are, you know, they can do a pre-sessional, but with a teacher, we can also teach them academic English, or the school can. But yes, I agree with you. It was one of mine. I didn't call it that, but university prep courses. This is something else that we've done in our school, in the British Council in Paris. We have a lot of young learner students. So we have a 2-year course, which is called University Prep. And a lot of it is academic skills and developing, even trying to help these 16 and 17-year-olds to develop the critical thinking skills that they will need when they go to university, with IELTS, a bit of IELTS prep at the end of the 2 years. But pre-sessional courses are very good. And I mean, depends. Open access courses, Alicia's saying, which are free with the Open University. And all of these, there's all these courses that are free on FutureLearn, the massive open online courses. So yeah, I mean, it's about how much we can do with them as teachers. I mean, it might be if they are, yeah, FutureLearn, Tessa, that's the one. It might be that if they're taking the general training version of IELTS, that all they need to do is work on general English. You know, they really don't need months and months of IELTS prep. My next question for you is, what do the students need to learn or to know? The Open University, Mohammed, if you do a search for it, you should find it. It's based in the UK. So to do well in IELTS, what do your students need to learn or know? For example, okay, lovely. So Benji's saying idioms, the vocab, the grammar, the criteria, Gula, yes, I completely agree. As teachers, we should be sharing the public marking criteria with the students. Raymond, they do need speed reading, and they also need reading skills. Elizabeth saying collocations, and Deborah, of course, the writing skills. They need to know all of that. So they need to know the language. That's the key one, but they obviously need to know the exam format, the strategies for the different types of questions that they're going to come up against. They definitely need to know what's required in the writing task. I agree, Lorna, I think they need topic-specific vocabulary, and as Sean Sian's saying, cross-referencing, academic vocabulary, etc. And, you know, generally, also they need, you know, they need to know what's expected, and they need all of this language. And Sean Sian's saying plenty of models. Yep, I totally agree with you. And the reading skills that Anissa's talking about, they need to understand when they're doing the reading that they don't read every word, they just find the information that is required. Yeah, and Sarah, they need not to hesitate, they need to have more confidence. So all of these things our students need to learn, but which of them do we need to teach them? A question for you. What things do we as teachers need to teach them, which they can't get anywhere else, that they can't do for themselves? What do you think? Amina, I agree. Yep. Time speaking tests. Yep. The strategies. They need feedback from us. They need to understand the question. Use of past papers, yes, if they're coming close to their test time. And use of presentation skills practice, that's a really nice way to help students get ready for speaking part 2, where they are effectively giving a presentation. So it's a really nice area to work on with them. Alicia is saying they need to be able to summarize. Yep. And Tessa, speaking under pressure, they shouldn't be under pressure in the speaking test. It should be a pleasant experience, but it's a test, and can a test be pleasant? So we need to teach them language skills, I think. You know, some they can do on their own, but they're going to need us. We're their teachers. We need to guide them. We need to help them identify where their strengths and weaknesses are and what they need to focus on. So language skills, as in speaking, reading, writing, listening, but also the language, I think. The language and the language skills. Yeah. Picking out keywords. So they need strategies for some of the question types, particularly in the reading papers. I think they need to be familiar with all those question types, and they need a strategy to deal with them. Marie Madeleine is asking why the students can't hear the listening test twice, because IELTS tries to mirror real life. And in real life, you can't rewind somebody and listen to them again. And when they're in university, if they're in a lecture, well, maybe nowadays, in fact, the lecture would be recorded and they could listen to it a second time afterwards, but it's not certain. Generally, the spoken interaction that you listen to, people repeat themselves and correct themselves, but we don't have the option to rewind. So IELTS is trying to test, well, in the real situation, you only hear it once. So how could you, you know, how would you cope? It's meant to be based on real life. We have to guide them into what's expected in the writing tasks. Paul Harrison's making a very good point there in the chat. Have a look at that. And particularly, I think with coherence and cohesion, I think I'm running out of time here. But anyway, what things can these students, that's a nice point, Sarah, using things not made for ESL. What do you think the students can learn by themselves if they're preparing for IELTS? Any ideas? Jan saying vocabulary in context. Yeah, they can really work on their vocabulary. They can look on the websites. Yep, yeah, exactly. I mean, for things that I really would say don't waste your class time doing is going through the exam format. I would say send them to the website, make them do the work, make them go and find out about the exam, make them come back to the class and tell each other what they've learned. Raymond, yep. They can use the academic word list, and there's fantastic exercises, free exercises on the site. Yep. And, you know, lots and lots of reading. Doing practice tests, I wouldn't, quite honestly, I wouldn't spend much of my class time doing practice tests. I would say, go and do a practice test at home. I would ask them then to come in, having done it. And for me, the value of the practice test, particularly if it's a sort of reading or a listening text, is going over it once you've done it, because that's where they're going to learn. So going over the test, understanding why they got something wrong, looking at the IELTS reading texts are a fantastic model of what's expected in writing. So looking at the use of topic sentences in the reading passage, looking at the features of cohesion that have been used in the reading passage, looking at that, obviously learning new vocabulary from it. No, Tessa, the academic word list, just you do a search by Avril Coxhead, and she was the first person to do it. So Avril Coxhead, it's somewhere down under Avril Coxhead academic word list, and there you find all the resources which your students can use as well, or you as a teacher can, use it to make exercises for them. And in terms of grammar and vocabulary, I would say, yes, we do have to help them with it, but I would also, for example, send them to sites like British Council Learn English site, where there's all this free grammar, vocabulary, practice exercises. Let them do the work, get them to bring their problems, their issues back to the classroom for you to deal with. I really would strongly advise against spending even 15 minutes of class time talking through the exam format or doing things like that. So it's all about, if they do a practice test, get them to do it in their own time, and then help them to understand what they didn't understand in the test, and try not to use too much class time on it. So what we worked on was some syllabuses for short courses, 16 hour and 20 hours for students at B2. And because the thinking is that, in fact, if someone's got the language level, they only need, 16 or 20 hours to actually understand IELTS. The problem isn't with the test. The problem is with the language. So our course syllabuses, which I'd send to you if you're interested, they use the official IELTS sources. They use free stuff that's on IELTS.org or Take IELTS or British Council or somewhere. Looks at all 4 skills, and if you want to email me to get a copy of them, and if you have some feedback, we'd be very happy to have that, because we'd like to improve them. But they're based around free resources that you can use if you've got students who already have the language level, and all you're trying to do is make sure that they have the exam techniques they need. So there's a question in Q&A from Sarah. No, it's not a question. Does anybody have any questions? My email is going to be on the next slide, or the end slide. Okay, I'm going to move on, because I'm pretty sure I'm almost out of time here. I'd like to just make you aware of the key resources where you can get materials and advice, either for you as a teacher or for your learners. So obviously there's IELTS.org, which is the partner site. There's a lot of material on there. The British Council's Take IELTS site, and the IDP IELTS Essentials site. And also, of course, the Cambridge Assessment English site, all wonderful places, and, to get information, to get materials that you can use. And as I mentioned before, the Learn English site, British Council's Learn English. One other thing to share with you. So let's move that out the way. So there's a British Council IELTS for Teachers Facebook page. So if you join that, we have regular sessions on there weekly, an IELTS expert. We're posting lesson plans, we're posting articles, we're posting things that we think would be useful for teachers, and you have a chance to ask questions and also engage and discuss. So if you're preparing students for IELTS and you think you could do with a bit of a community, that's what we're trying to create with it. The Future Learn free online course for test takers. So if your students need to do more and you've only got them for 2 hours a week, tell them to take the online course. It's 3 weeks full-time that they can also do. There's an IELTS prep app and the books and study guides. I don't have the link to the Facebook page, Paul, but if you do a search by British Council IELTS for Teachers Facebook page, it'll come up. Road to IELTS is free. Yep. And if I can just get my last slide to work. Okay, that is my email address. So I would like to share with you our syllabuses. I'd be very happy to have any feedback from you, either on the syllabuses or on something else, other suggestions, any other questions. So I think I'm out of time. I don't exactly know how this works. I just want to say a great thank you to all of you for coming. I'm so glad this is such a success, because I think Jonathan and the Language So people have done an amazing job to take what is a huge face-to-face event and put it online. So big thank you to you for taking part. Do contact me with questions. And, you know, I think we're living in very strange times. It's not easy for anybody. And we're interacting like this online, which I must say from my perspective is fairly surreal at the moment. But, you know, just stay safe, everybody. I'm sure that we'll get through this. And, you know, I hope to see you again sometime. I hope to see you at the Language Show next year, if it's allowed to be face-to-face. So thank you all very much. Stay safe and do contact me if I can help in any way.